the summer of 2024, a young woman named Kaylee posted a video from her phone. She had been walking to the beach alone in Byron Bay, Australia, a 10-minute walk on a clear, sunny afternoon. She noticed a car stop suddenly in the middle of the road ahead of her. The woman in the passenger seat was staring at Kaylee with an expression she couldn't quite read. Then the woman looked past her, over her shoulder. Kaylee turned around. A man was standing just a few feet behind her. She hadn't heard him approach. He was dressed completely wrong for the weather. Gloves, a beanie, 30 degrees and blazing sun. He had been close enough to reach her. When she looked directly at him, he disappeared around a corner. Kaylee made it to the beach, but she couldn't stop thinking about what had just happened. That night, she started searching online. What she found stopped her cold. Over the past several decades, more than 60 people had vanished along this stretch of the Australian coastline. Most of them were women. Almost none of the cases had been solved. This is the story of Byron Bay and the disappearances that turned a paradise into something else entirely. Byron Bay sits on the far north coast of New South Wales, roughly 700 kilometres from Sydney and 160 from Brisbane. It is the easternmost point of mainland Australia, a place of white beaches, lighthouse cliffs, and warm ocean. For decades it has drawn surfers, backpackers, artists, and travellers from around the world. Chris Hemsworth grew up here. Celebrities holiday here. Travel guides describe it as one of the most beautiful places on earth. But behind that reputation, local residents had been whispering for years about something darker. The disappearances, the unsolved cases, the women who left and never came home. Most people outside the region had never heard of it. That changed in October 2024. When a member of the New South Wales Parliament, Jeremy Buckingham, stood up and said what many had long believed. In a formal address, he called it the worst unsolved serial crime in the state's history. He said that a person, or persons, had been operating freely along the northern rivers and Byron Bay coastline for decades. He said that dozens of women had vanished or been killed, that investigations had been mishandled, and that the public deserved answers. His statement made international headlines. But for the families of the missing, it was simply confirmation of what they had always known. In July 1977, 21-year-old Narelle Cox was waiting for a letter. She had applied to a nursing school in Darwin and was hoping to be accepted onto a training program. While she waited, she decided to visit her friend Faye in Grafton, a town not far from Byron Bay. She left a note on the kitchen table at home. Gone to Faye's in Noosa, back Monday. She had just celebrated her birthday and received $200 as a gift from her family. Her mother had urged her to spend some of that money on a bus ticket rather than hitchhiking. Narelle had done it before, and the long stretches of empty road between Australian towns had always made her mother uneasy. Whether Narelle took the bus that day is unknown. What is known is that Monday came and went, and she did not return. Her mother went to the post office and sent a telegram to Faye. The reply confirmed her worst fear. Faye had not seen Narelle at all. The family went to police immediately. The response was familiar to anyone who would later follow this case. Narelle was 21 years old, they were told. She had likely chosen to start a new life somewhere. Adults make their own decisions. Her mother insisted this made no sense. Narelle had been waiting for exam results that arrived the very next day after she left. She had plans. She had a future she was building. She would never have walked away from it without a word. Police remained unconvinced. The investigation stalled. Over the following months, there were faint traces. A truck driver came forward claiming he had given Neril a lift. He then asked to remain anonymous. Police did not press him for a formal statement, and the man was never identified. A year after she disappeared, a welfare application submitted in Sydney appeared to match her name, but investigators eventually determined it was an old document. The lead went nowhere. For 6 years, an unwrapped Christmas present sat beneath the family's tree. A coat and some cosmetics, bought for Narl the year she disappeared. Her family could not bring themselves to remove it. Her case was officially closed in the early 1980s, reopened briefly in 2005, and then shelved again. Narl Cox has never been found. On a warm July evening in 1978, 2 young women went out for a night in Newcastle, a city to the south of Byron Bay. 17-year-old Annie Tomic and 18-year-old Joy Hodgins were close friends. They told their housemates they were heading to the Ambassador nightclub and would be back in roughly 5 hours. Joy had grown up in difficult circumstances. Orphaned young, she had been adopted at 11, but her adoptive mother had recently died, and she was once again navigating the world largely alone. She was living with Annie and 2 other friends in a house just a few hundred meters from where Annie had grown up. Neither of them came home. 3 days after they disappeared, a letter arrived at the house addressed to their housemates. It was written in Joy's handwriting. The letter said the 2 girls were fine, that they had decided to stay with friends for a while and would be in touch later. Their friend Sharon noticed something strange about the letter. There were no mistakes, no crossings out. It read as if Joy had been copying from a prepared text, not writing freely. Sharon went to the police station to report them missing. She was turned away. A missing persons report, she was told, could only be filed by a close family member. Joy was an orphan. Sharon did not qualify. Police did take down some details and accepted the letter. But when Sharon returned to the station weeks later, there was no record of her visit. No report had been opened, and the letter had disappeared. Annie's family filed a report 3 weeks after the girls went missing. In early 1979, police contacted Annie's mother with what they described as good news. They had located her daughter. She was alive, had turned 18, and had specifically asked not to be found by her parents. She would make contact when she was ready. She never did. And investigators later acknowledged that at the time police contacted Annie's mother, Annie had not yet turned 18. In 1990, Joy's adoptive brother began searching for her on his own. He discovered that police had no file on her disappearance. Her name was not in the missing persons database. Joy Hodgins had never been officially reported missing at all. It was not until 1998, 20 years after both women vanished, that Joy's name was formally added to any missing persons record. That happened only because human bones washed onto Stockton Beach, prompting police to review old unsolved cases. The bones did not belong to either woman, but investigators noticed for the first time that Annie and Joy had disappeared together on the same night. They had simply never been treated as a connected case. 47 years later, there are no answers. Joy's adoptive grandmother, who raised her after her adoptive mother died, later wrote, "She was a little girl who needed a great deal of love, and I loved her. I have thought about her every single day since she disappeared. 6 months after Annie and Joy went missing, another young woman vanished from the same city. Lynn Beth Goobel was 20 years old in December 1978. She worked as a waitress at the Ambassador nightclub in Newcastle, the same club Annie and Joy had visited the night they disappeared. On December 30th, Lynn travelled by train to Newcastle after spending Christmas with her mother in Sydney. She stopped at a hotel bar called The Start, spoke briefly with several people she knew, had a glass of wine, and left. No one saw her after that. Her mother assumed she had gone to spend New Year's with friends. It was a full week before she realised something was wrong. When she contacted police, the response was the same. Lynn was an adult. She had probably left of her own accord. She would turn up eventually. She never did. On January 12, 1979, a young couple was seen at a bus stop on Jonson Street in Byron Bay. Annika Adriansen was 18 years old. Alan Fox was 21. They had been together for about 2 years and were deeply serious about their future. They had already been approved for a land loan and had sent wedding invitations to their families. They were travelling by hitchhike from Berowra through Kempsey toward the coast, intending to look at a parcel of land near Upper Bar, a quiet rural area they had dreamed of settling on together. Friends described them as full of plans. Alan was close to his family. His father, Harry, was the kind of man who kept his commitments and expected others to do the same. After they were seen at the bus stop in Byron Bay, they were never seen again. A friend of Annika's initially told police she had met the couple on January 15th in Kempsey on their way back. That account redirected the search away from Byron Bay for years. Investigators later discovered the friend had made an error. The meeting had been on the 12th, before the couple travelled to Byron Bay, not after. By the time this was corrected, the trail was cold. In 2005, police announced a reward of 100,000 Australian dollars for information about the couple's fate. No one came forward. Every year after they disappeared, Harry Fox returned to the bus stop in Byron Bay, where his son and Annika had last been seen. He stood there with a photograph, hoping someone might recognize them. He kept coming back until he could no longer make the journey. Annika and Alan have never been found. On April 7th, 1979, 18-year-old Robin Hickey left her home in Belmont, a suburb of Newcastle, to meet a friend. She was last seen standing at a bus stop on the Pacific Highway in Belmont North. What happened after that? Whether she boarded a bus, accepted a lift, or encountered someone on that road is unknown. Her father later said, "You keep hoping. But experience teaches you that hope leads nowhere. There is only more disappointment ahead. Robin Hickey has never been found." 2 weeks after Robin Hickey disappeared on April 21st, 1979, a 14-year-old girl named Amanda Robinson vanished from the same stretch of the Pacific Highway. Amanda had attended a school disco that evening, her first. Her mother was in hospital recovering from complications after childbirth and could not collect her. Amanda had made arrangements with a friend's father to give her a lift home, but she was having too good a time to leave when he arrived, and she told him she would catch the bus home with other students instead. She called her stepfather from the venue and asked him to meet her at the bus stop near their house. He fell asleep. Around midnight, Amanda got off the bus at her stop. It was quiet and dark. She was a few hundred meters from home. That distance was never crossed. The following morning, her bed was untouched. That same night, 2 separate women called the local police station to report hearing a loud scream in the street. Officers drove to the area. They found nothing and took no formal statements from either woman. Later, investigators reviewing the shift report from that night discovered a separate entry, a record of an attempted abduction nearby. A woman walking alone had been grabbed by a man who jumped from a car and tried to force her inside. She broke free and escaped. No description of the man or vehicle was recorded. No follow-up investigation was opened. When Amanda's family later asked police to return the family photographs they had submitted, the only pictures they had of their daughter, they were told the photographs had been lost. In 2019, Amanda's case was formally linked to those of Robin Hickey and another young woman named Gordana Kotevsky, who had vanished under similar circumstances in the same area 15 years later. Investigators asked whether the same person could have been responsible for all 3 disappearances. No conclusion was ever reached. In 2001, police examined whether convicted serial killer Ivan Milak had any connection to these cases. No evidence linking him to them was ever found. In 2021, the New South Wales government announced a reward of $2 million Australian dollars for information about these unsolved disappearances and murders. That reward has never been claimed. The cases from the 1970s and early 1980s share a pattern that is difficult to ignore. Young women traveling alone or in pairs. Disappearances near the same stretch of highway and coastline. Investigations that stalled early or never properly began. Families turned away at police stations. Reports that were never filed. Evidence that disappeared. But the disappearances did not stop in the 1980s. They continued into the 1990s, into the 2000s, and beyond. And in 2019, a young man from Belgium arrived in Byron Bay with a return flight booked and a life waiting for him in Brussels. He was last seen walking through a dark forest toward a lighthouse at the eastern edge of Australia. His phone went silent a few hours later. His body has never been found. Next, we follow the cases that came after, and the question that investigators and families have never stopped asking: was this the work of one person, or something far more complicated? On the night of May 29th, 2019, an 18-year-old named Theo Hayes left a bar in Byron Bay and opened his phone to check directions back to his hostel. The map showed 2 routes. One was faster, one was more scenic. He chose the second one. It led him through a cricket field known locally as a place where homeless people slept and drugs were sold. Then through dense bush. Then along a narrow track that wound up toward the Cape Byron Lighthouse, the easternmost point of mainland Australia. Volunteers who later retraced that route in daylight said they were surprised anyone could navigate it at night. The path was overgrown, the ground uneven, the light almost non-existent. Theo moved quickly. At certain points, according to the GPS data recovered from his Google account, he was moving faster than seemed possible for someone unfamiliar with the terrain. He reached the beach below the lighthouse just after midnight. He sat down on the sand, responded to messages from friends and family, opened a YouTube video, watched 2 minutes of it, and then switched off his GPS to save battery. His phone moved a few meters up the slope and back. Then, a short time after that, the signal disappeared entirely. Theo Hayes has been missing since May 29th, 2019. No trace of him has ever been found. In part 1, We followed the disappearances that began along Australia's Northern Rivers coastline in the 1970s. Cases where young women vanished and investigations were barely opened. Families turned away from police stations, evidence lost, names absent from missing persons databases for decades. In this part, we pick up where those cases left off and examine what happened when the disappearances continued and when the world finally started paying attention. In late 1980, a young woman named Linda Ray accepted a lift in Newcastle. The driver pulled away from the road she needed and headed instead toward Glenrock Scout Camp, a remote area outside the city. He stopped the car, told her she had got into the wrong vehicle, and began to assault her. Before he could go further, another car appeared. Its headlights swept across the scene. The man was momentarily distracted. Linda ran. She reached the second vehicle and was pulled inside by a couple who drove her to safety. An 18-year-old was arrested in connection with the attack. He was acquitted and released. No further investigation followed. Linda Ray survived. She said she never forgot the couple who stopped to help her, and that she thought about that night for the rest of her life. In 1989, a woman named Susan Keeley vanished while hitchhiking. She had recently separated from her husband and was traveling to visit friends. She had no job at the time and no fixed plans. Her disappearance drew little attention. Court documents related to her divorce proceedings later revealed that her estranged husband had been required to pay her $35,000 as part of a settlement. She had also been seeking custody of their children. Whether any of this was relevant to her disappearance was never determined. The case was never solved. In 2003, a woman named Rose Howe disappeared from the Byron Bay area. Her disappearance was not reported for 2 days. By then, the trail was cold. In 2006, the body of Danica Nielsen was found outside a local pub called the Channon Tavern. Her killer has never been identified. By the time Theo Hayes arrived in Byron Bay in May 2019, he had been traveling Australia for almost a year. He was 18 years old from Brussels, Belgium, and had been accepted to study engineering at university. His flight home was already booked. He was staying at the Wake Up hostel. He was days away from leaving. On the evening of May 28th, he went out with a fellow traveller he had met at the hostel. They drank at the hostel before heading to a bar called Cheeky Monkeys. Surveillance cameras captured Theo dancing. He appeared calm and in good spirits. He had had 2 beers at the bar, in addition to what he had drunk at the hostel earlier. Sometime around 11 in the evening, staff asked Theo to leave. The bar had a strict policy. Anyone showing signs of intoxication was asked to go, and their ID was logged so they could not enter other venues in town that night. On this particular evening, for reasons that were never explained, the bar was not logging IDs. The other people Theo had been with stayed behind. He left alone. Outside, he opened Google Maps and checked 2 routes to his hostel. He chose the longer, more scenic one, a path that took him past the cricket fields, through private properties, and into the dense bush above the lighthouse. Theo's family eventually accessed his Google account and reconstructed his movements almost minute by minute. The detail that stood out immediately was the pace. On sections of the path that were rough and overgrown, Theo appeared to be moving faster than a person unfamiliar with the terrain would move. Journalists and documentary makers who later followed the route in daylight described being surprised by how difficult it was. Branches, undergrowth, uneven ground, zero visibility at night. Volunteers searching the area later found Theo's favorite baseball cap on the path. He had not gone back for it. His family believed he had not been alone. They noted that Theo had navigated around a homeless person's tent that was hidden off the path, a location known only to people familiar with the area. They noted that despite having Google Maps open multiple times at night, he consistently moved away from the route toward his hostel and toward the lighthouse. They asked whether someone he met near the cricket fields had offered to walk with him, or show him something, or suggested a night visit to the Cape. There was no answer to that question. At the beach below the lighthouse, Theo sat in the sand and replied to messages from family and friends. The messages gave no indication of distress. He seemed relaxed. He opened a YouTube video of a comedy show he liked and watched 2 minutes before closing it. Then he turned off his GPS. After that, there is only a brief record of movement, a few meters up the slope, a few meters back, and then nothing. Police opened a formal search on June 6th. They searched Tallow Beach, the surrounding bush, and the cliff faces. They found nothing. No phone, no clothing, no remains. The official investigation was wound down after 17 days. The working conclusion was accidental death. A fall from the cliffs with the body taken by the ocean. Theo's family did not accept this. He had been surfing and was physically capable in open water. The tide conditions that night, according to marine experts, should have carried a body back toward shore, not permanently out to sea. If he had fallen, they argued, something would eventually have washed up. Nothing ever did. Theo Hayes remains officially listed as a missing person. His mother has said that after 5 years of searching, she has made a painful peace with the idea that she will not find him. She says she still feels his presence, but she has accepted that she cannot continue to search and also continue to live. In July 2021, a 25-year-old man named Jackson Stecker was traveling Australia in his own camper van. He arrived in the Byron Bay area and was last in contact with his mother on July 22nd. He told her he was going offline for a while and would be in touch. On July 23rd, his van was found parked with the keys still in the ignition. A woman had contacted his family to ask if the vehicle was for sale, assuming it had been abandoned. That call was what alerted his family that something was wrong. A month later, Jackson's remains were found in bushland. Police initially classified his death as suspicious. They later concluded it was suicide. His family strongly disputed this finding. Jackson was found face down. A large hunting knife was found beneath his body. Fragments of his skull were discovered 13 meters from the rest of his remains. His teeth and some finger bones were also found separately. His family noted that Jackson had been in good spirits in his last communications with his mother. He had no known history of depression and had been seeking help for some difficulties in the past, actively engaging with support, not withdrawing from it. His mother said she had heard nothing in their final conversation that concerned her. When investigators searched his van, the interior had been disturbed. Seat upholstery had been torn. Items were scattered. His laptop, phone, and other electronics were missing. His phone was later tracked as having been active in the Lismore area after the estimated date of his death. A television crew filming a report about the case found a mobile phone lying in the undergrowth near the site, covered in dirt. Whose phone it was has never been established. A vape device found nearby was tested for DNA, but no match was returned. Jackson's family later returned to the location where his remains were found and discovered a human tooth and several bone fragments that police had not recovered. Forensic analysis confirmed the bones belonged to Jackson. A coronial inquest into his death began in February 2024. No final determination had been made at the time this script was written. In 2009, a young woman named Jasmine Urek disappeared in Byron Bay. Witnesses who were present that night reported that she may have been intoxicated. No one was ever charged in connection with her disappearance. In late 2019, a woman named Tia Little, who had been living in bushland camps north of Byron Bay, was reported missing. Her body was found in 2020 in scrubland. The investigation into her death produced no arrests. The New South Wales Police have stated publicly that there is currently no evidence to suggest all of these cases are connected to a single perpetrator. The disappearances span more than 4 decades, involve different victims in different circumstances, and some may have explanations unrelated to foul play. Australia's Northern Rivers region has rugged terrain, dangerous coastlines, and a transient population. Accidents happen. People fall from cliffs. People disappear into the bush. But the number of unresolved cases concentrated in this area is difficult to set aside. Over 60 people, the majority of them women, have disappeared or been found dead along this coastline since the late 1970s. Investigations were repeatedly mishandled in the early decades. Statements were lost. Names were left out of databases. Families were turned away. Witnesses went unquestioned. In October 2024, Jeremy Buckingham's parliamentary statement called for a formal independent inquiry. He described the failures as systematic, not coincidental, and said the public deserved to know how many of these cases had been allowed to go cold due to investigative error rather than lack of evidence. Whether that inquiry will happen and what it might uncover remains to be seen. In the early 2000s, a woman named Laura was living in Byron Bay. She has since spoken publicly about an experience she had while hitchhiking a short distance from Byron to Suffolk Park, a 10-minute drive. She and a friend accepted a lift from a man in a van. When Laura went to take the front passenger seat, she found a large, heavily rusted knife lying on it. She moved it to the floor and asked the driver what it was for. He said he was a cook. She asked where he worked. He said, "Nowhere at the moment." Something shifted in that exchange, and Laura asked to be let out. They were dropped off, and the van drove away. She has said she does not know if that man was dangerous. She does know that Byron Bay gave her an unsettled feeling that she never fully explained. She described a town that looked like paradise from the outside, but that felt underneath like a place where something had gone wrong and never been corrected. There is a detail that stays with many people who follow this case. Every year for years after his son disappeared, Harry Fox drove back to Byron Bay and stood at the bus stop on Johnson Street, the last place anyone had seen Alan and Annika. He held a photograph. He hoped someone might stop and recognize them. No one ever did. The families of the missing have spent decades asking not just what happened, but what was not done. Which witnesses were never questioned. Which reports were never filed. Which leads were dismissed too quickly or not followed at all. Some of those questions may never be answered. The people who could have answered them are gone, or have stayed silent for 40 years, or were simply never asked. But the cases remain open. The reward money remains unclaimed. and along the coast of New South Wales, between Byron Bay and Newcastle, there are families still waiting for a phone call that has not come. Subscribe to the channel for new cases every week. Stay safe. Good night.